What do you do when your complaint is ignored after being harassed at work? What if your manager threatens you and the company chooses to protect him instead of you? If you have a similar story, please send it to the email address in the description because the story I am going to tell you today might just be a version of your own story.
It was that hot Arizona morning in November. The sun had not yet risen in Phoenix, but I was already awake. The clock showed 6 in the morning, and I was getting ready for my first shift. It had only been 3 weeks since I started my seasonal worker position at AIM Market. I was 23 years old, and after graduating from university, I wanted to gain retail experience to add to my CV. The holiday season was approaching, and the company had hired dozens of temporary employees to handle the busy period between Thanksgiving and Christmas. My first day was exciting. I had put on my red polo shirt, ironed my khaki pants, and tied my hair in a bun. With my shoulder-length brown hair, green eyes, and 5'7" height, I was a standard American university graduate. My family was in Texas, but I was trying to stand on my own feet in Arizona. This job was temporary, but it was a beginning. When I first met store manager Derek Sullivan, he was a middle-aged man with combed gray hair, dark brown eyes, approximately 6'1" in height, and slightly overweight. His hands were always in his pockets, and he swayed strangely when he walked. He was 42 years old and had been working at the company for 17 years. On the first day, he kept smiling while showing me around the store, but that smile seemed strange to me. For some reason, it stirred a strange feeling inside me. The first week went smoothly. They assigned me to check out, to the registers. I learned to smile at customers, work quickly, and always say welcome to AIM Market. I learned how to process red card credit card applications, how to work at the returns and exchanges desk, and how to use the in-store walkie-talkie system. Everything seemed normal. The other employees at the store had also been very helpful, especially Susan, an elderly woman in her 60s with gray hair and a sweet smile. She had taught me how the register worked on my first day. She explained the store layout, where each department was located, what the codes meant. She showed me where I could sit during lunch breaks and how employee discounts worked. In those days, everything looked good, and I thought I could stay at this job for a long time. Things started to change at the beginning of the second week. Derek came to my register. There were no customers in line, and I was cleaning the conveyor belt in front of the register. He approached me, very close. I felt him entering my personal space. I noticed my body tensing up. Derek turned to me and ran his eyes from my head to my feet. This look was very disturbing. Then he told me, "Madison, you look very beautiful today. This color suits you very well." I just said thank you and looked away, but he continued to stay there. He asked me if I had just moved to Phoenix, whether I had a boyfriend, what I did on weekends. The questions might have seemed innocent, but his tone and looks were not innocent at all. From that day on, Derek's interest in me began to increase. He came to my register at least 3 or 4 times every shift. Sometimes for no reason, he would just stand next to me and try to chat. Sometimes he would touch my shoulder. Sometimes he would lightly tap my arm. These touches made me uncomfortable every time, but I did not know what to do. This was my first retail job, and I thought maybe this was normal in such a work environment. In the middle of the 3rd week, during an afternoon shift, I had gone to the break room to rest. The break room was in the back of the store, a small area. Inside were a few tables, chairs, a refrigerator, a microwave, and a coffee machine. I was sitting there, looking at social media on my phone. I had a bottle of water in my hand. There was no one else in the room. Derek entered. When he saw me, that strange smile appeared on his face. He closed the door behind him. I felt my heart racing. He walked toward me and sat in the chair across from me. "Madison, I want to talk to you," he said. His voice was low, almost a whisper. He told me he knew I lived alone in Arizona, that I was far from my family, that I needed this job. Then he added that if I wanted to continue working here, I needed to get along well with him. As he said these words, he reached his hand across the table and tried to hold my hand. I immediately pulled my hand back and stood up. Without looking at him, I apologized. said my break time was over, that I needed to return to the register, and quickly left the room. That day, when my shift ended and I was driving home, my hands were trembling. I sat in the car and thought about what to do. Who should I tell about this situation? Should I go to human resources? But what if they did not believe me? What if I lost my job? How would I pay my rent? The next day when I went to my shift, I tried to ignore Derek, but he would not leave me alone. At noon when the store was crowded, he came to me while I was at the register. Customers had started to line up. Derek stood behind me, very close. I could feel his breath on the back of my neck. He whispered in my ear that I looked very sexy today, that these pants showed my body very well. I froze. We were in front of customers and I could not do anything. I just smiled and continued to serve the customer. When Derek walked away, I noticed my knees were shaking. That evening, when my shift ended, I went directly to the Human Resources office. The HR representative was a woman named Ashley in her 30s, with black hair, brown eyes, and a serious demeanor. She wore glasses and had organized files on her desk. I told her about the situation. I told her everything. I told her about Derek's comments, his touches, the conversation in the break room, what he said at the register today. My voice was trembling and my eyes were filled with tears. Ashley took notes. She told me we were facing a very serious matter, that they would investigate this, that they would get back to me in a few days. She told me to stay away from Derek, and if anything happened again, to inform her immediately. When I left the office, I felt a bit relieved. At least someone had listened to me. But the next day, Derek's behavior had changed. He was not approaching me, not talking to me, not even looking at me. He ignored me throughout the shift. Although I was relieved at first, I then noticed the situation was getting strange. It was as if he knew I had gone to HR. 3 days later, Ashley called me back to her office. When I sat down, I saw the expression on her face and my heart sank. She told me they had spoken with Derek, that he denied all the accusations, that he said nothing like that had ever happened. Derek had claimed he was just being friendly, that he always tried to help new employees, that I had misunderstood. Ashley told me she was sorry but without evidence, they could not do anything. She advised me to stay away from Derek, and our conversation was over. When I left the office, I was furious. They had not believed me. They had protected Derek, but why? Because he had been there for 17 years and I was just a 3-week temporary employee, who would believe whom? From that day on, Derek's attitude toward me changed. He was no longer kind. He was constantly giving me difficult tasks. He was assigning me to the busiest registers. He was shortening my break times. He was constantly changing my shifts. He had started to make my life miserable. One day he had assigned me to closing shift, the next day to opening shift. My body could not adjust to such a rapidly changing sleep schedule. I constantly felt tired and tense. A week later, on Saturday afternoon, I was on shift. The store was extremely crowded. The shopping frenzy before Thanksgiving had begun. There were long lines at the registers. I was working at checkout lane number 7. I was tired and stressed. At that moment, Jessica Torres from the electronics department came to my register. Jessica was a 28-year-old woman of Hispanic origin, with long black hair, brown eyes, and 5'5" in height. She was very energetic and talkative. She approached me and lowered her voice to say she wanted to talk to me. She asked me to meet her in the break room during my break time. An hour later, I met Jessica in the break room. She had also gotten a coffee and sat at the table. She told me what had happened. Derek was doing the same things to her too. It had started 6 months ago. He was constantly commenting on Jessica, making inappropriate touches, asking questions about her private life. Jessica had also gone to HR, but they had not believed her either. Jessica said Derek was trying to get her fired, constantly finding faults, giving her written warnings. Then Jessica told me there was someone else, a cashier named Emily Rodriguez, 21 years old. Emily was also Derek's victim. Jessica said Emily was very scared, could not even tell her family. Emily was young, naive, and very timid. That day, the 3 of us met in the break room. Emily was a young girl with blonde hair, blue eyes, very thin, and 5'3" in height. She kept clasping her hands together, and I noticed her voice trembling when she spoke. She told us what Derek had done to her. She was crying. Derek had also made inappropriate advances to her, touched her, called her to his office, and said private things to her. That day, the three of us made a decision. If HR would not help us, we would go to corporate. We would prepare a collective complaint petition to AIM Market's regional office in Phoenix. Even if they did not believe us individually, 3 women making the same complaint at the same time might prompt them to take action. That evening when I got home, I opened my laptop and started writing a detailed complaint letter. I wrote down every incident, the dates, the times, what Derek said, what he did, one by one. Jessica and Emily also prepared their own letters. 2 days later, we compiled all 3 of our letters and sent them as an email to the corporate office. We also sent physical copies by mail. A week passed and we received no response. The second week also passed the same way. Derek was still there and had started to make our lives miserable. He was constantly changing our shifts, giving us the worst tasks. He had given Jessica a final written warning. Emily was constantly crying. I no longer wanted to go to work every morning. When the alarm went off, my stomach would turn. My sleep was disrupted at night, and I constantly had nightmares. One day Derek called me to the storage room. I did not want to be there alone with him, but I could not refuse. I went but left the door open. He approached me and started threatening me. He said if I did not withdraw my complaints, I could lose my job. I would not be able to find work anywhere, that he would give me a bad reference. He was not raising his voice, but his tone was very frightening. At that moment, I realized how dangerous this man was. At the beginning of the 3rd week, 2 people came to the store. The district manager and an investigating officer from corporate. Both were wearing suits and had serious facial expressions. When they came to the store, they called all the management and us to separate offices. They met with me for 2 hours. I told everything again. This time notes were taken, voice recordings were made, every detail was questioned. They also met separately with Jessica and Emily. They also called Derek. I will never forget the look of panic on Derek's face that day. Things had gotten serious now. 2 days later, Derek Sullivan was fired, effective immediately. He gathered his belongings and was escorted out of the store by security. When I last saw him, his face was bright red, his hands were trembling, and he was looking at the floor. Corporate office met with us separately. They apologized to us. They admitted that the HR at the store had been inadequate, that they had not taken the situation seriously. They offered us compensation. Jessica and I were offered permanent positions if we wanted. Emily continued as a seasonal worker, but she was also given a better department. I did not accept the offer. I did not want to continue working at AIM Market. That store was now filled only with bad memories for me. I finished my seasonal position at the end of the holiday season and left. Jessica accepted and is still working there. Emily also left at the end of the season.
This story taught me a lot. You have the right to feel safe at a workplace. If a manager is treating you inappropriately, it is not your fault. Never stay silent and never blame yourself. Sometimes your first complaint may not get a response, but do not give up. Unite with others, speak out, and demand your rights. Because as long as you stay silent, the next victim will be you or someone else.